Let's do it. Necrit. Honestly, this is a long video. I'm not even going to go through the comments. Let's go. Nice.
Well, hello there. It seems like people really enjoy
same pants.
it when I talk about things covered in deep layers of copium. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think we're riding on copium that much. So far, I have not made up a single thing. I am simply presenting things.
Is saying copium or hopium? We are really riding on hopium for this one. Copium, not really, because there's nothing to cope with.
That already exist. And as my videos got traction,
100%.
I started getting some valuable feedback. So before we begin today's video, let's have a look at some of the things you just had to point out. For those of you who believe we are starting unhealthy hype, it's fine. As long as we all understand that we are dealing with hypotheticals, and that we will all be bold by the time it comes out.
I mean, unhealthy hype 4 years plus in advance, it's all gonna die down up until they announce the actual release trailer. Like, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, the hype right now really, it doesn't matter at all.
I also got to interview the person who wrote the upcoming massive League of Legends novel, who was confirmed to now be working on the MMO. And he told me that, yes, my videos are being passed among the developers. So you can stop tagging them on Twitter now. Also, that novel is insanely good. It's Game of Thrones in League of Legends. I am excited for the potential lore of the MMO. Next, yeah, I am wearing my slippers out of my own volition. Yes, shamans can shapeshift in this universe, just like druids. And yes, Riot confirmed that Legends of Runeterra, which is the card game based on League of Legends, is a big inspiration when it comes to the world building. In case you're wondering what this is about, all the art I'm showing you comes from Legends of Runeterra. A game that
Really? All this animation, like these artworks, are from a card game. Interesting.
Secretly acts as a massive archive of art that reveals this universe.
That's cool.
Anyway, after covering the world and all the races and classes
their
the
resources.
lore supports, we can now dive
a good usage of the resources
into the potential endgame bosses of this MMO. Now I know what you're thinking. This game isn't even in the playtesting phase. How can we talk about the raids?
You have to. I mean, you're gonna design at least 3 raids for like the release minimum. Now, as far as raids go, the way I see them making bosses, if we're gonna just use League of Legends characters, the ones who are like at the A rank tier of strength. So for example, Kassadin's like C rank tier technically, like strength compared to like all the others, C maybe D, right? What's it called? Mundo is like a C or a D. Aatrox is like an S, right? Pantheon is like an S or an A plus, right? Taric is like an A. Aurelian Soul is an S. Unfortunately, Zoe is an S, right? So those like A's and S's are going to be the actual raid bosses. Not necessarily like the last boss. The S probably are last bosses, but like A's would be like something. And again, I don't think we'll be fighting Pantheon or Zoe necessarily. I'm just saying like that level of power are what the raids are gonna be about. Right, as well as like you're gonna have the ancient ones and void and all that stuff. Depends on the theme.
Well, you see, that's because Riot was probably thinking ahead of time. And they started a bit of a meme in the lore community. They gave this universe way too many world-ending threats. The downside of this is that, yeah, there was a time when we didn't know which world-ending threat was the real world-ending threat. It was a battle between who's the biggest evil. But the benefits are obvious. You have a lot of meaningful enemies that you can remove before you start limiting your storytelling. And in fact, many of these big storylines are written with all the back doors open, so that in the future they can utilize them for an event in League of Legends, or it is stories that were left open purposefully for the MMO. And that's what this video is going to be about. Originally, I wanted to show you 10 storylines that were left open and which would lead into raids. But if you look at the length of this video, yeah, I cut it down to only 7.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's get on it. Since we are essentially talking about the world of League of Legends, especially if you have seen our last 2 MMO videos, It goes without saying that this world has material for hundreds of instances. This means that it's really up to Riot to cherry pick which one.
I really hope they're making this a horizontal progression, not a vertical one. More in the sense of like ESO than in the sense of like World of Warcraft. I really like horizontal progression the most, meaning everything that you do before, like an expansion or a DLC comes out, is not completely irrelevant. It just like ESO does it very well with like all the sets they have, and then you can mix and match sets and stuff like that. Now obviously it's in a much better state than it was on release, but it's still, they're only able to do it because they made it so that it's a horizontal progression only. I like that a lot more. It means all the raids are always relevant and stuff like that, so whenever you add something new, it's cool, but it's not like game breaking, right? It's, you can do it for the achievement, you can do it to get certain set items. Hopefully everything is bind on account, like everything you don't trade, like you can just put on your stash and move to a different character. Like, let people play the game
once they want to do. And since in this video I am only going to mention 7 of these, it is highly likely I am not going to mention the one that you would like to see. But if you feel strong about your own idea about the dungeon, feel free to comment about it below. This is all valuable feedback for the...
Kindred is definitely a raid boss type of character, by the way. Like, I mean, the only reason I'm talking about Kindred is because I made like a fucking 1 hour lore about Kindred across 2 videos, but yeah.
The developers after all. Anyway, the 7 raids I picked are based on one simple fact. Their stories and setting are perfectly fit for a raid environment. Be it because their stories are set up for a grand finale, or because some of these villains already have a cast of supporting bosses for the raid.
Yeah.
Or simply because the battles would be really cool.
Yeah.
And because showing is better than telling, let's start with the first raid.
Let's go.
One with such a good setup, the raid essentially writes itself. The Ascension of Mount Dargon. As you may remember, Mount Dargon was created by the celestial gods to serve as a gateway to the celestial realms.
I would say Mount Dargon is more of a world boss area than a raid area. That's how I would feel about it. Like, maybe rotating world boss based on season, like somebody said in the comments, because of like how constellations shift depends on the season, depends on like what month it is, you would see a different constellation. You can have a different world boss probably on rotation every 2-3 months, something like that, so you have 6 to 4 different world bosses that are rotating all around the year. I think that would be cool. They give different buffs.
And people decide to climb this place for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Even though only about 1 in 10,000 makes it to the peak, some people try to climb the mountain because they want to be deemed worthy and become a celestial demigod, while, for example, the Marcians send their criminals here to die trying to climb the mountain. This death sentence is called the Crown of Stone. And yes, of course, you can't really force the criminals to climb the mountain unless you go there with them. So most criminals just flee and start a new life elsewhere. Also, at the peak of the mountain, we can find Aurelian Soul, the Star Forger. The reason why he is here is because of the crown he is wearing. Long story short, thousands of years ago, when people noticed that Aurelian was crossing the stars, they started worshipping him, which boosted Aurelian's ego. And they crafted him a crown of celestial star metal. Aurelian, already being quite egoistic, donned the crown, only to realize it was a mind-controlling device. In reality, it was the celestial aspects who wanted to hold Aurelian's power the entire time. Now, to be fair, the aspects are using Aurelian's powers for good cause.
It's so funny though. He's so dumb. This guy literally created the planet that you live on as a character, and he was enslaved by those people. They
are using his celestial fire to purge the void from Runeterra. But still, it is the celestial aspects who enslaved Aurelian.
Yeah.
Anyway, Riot can make up a billion...
And he doesn't sound very happy about it too, so...
reasons why we should raid this place. Though I doubt we would be able to fight Aurelian Soul at the very peak. You know, he is made out of space. But maybe we need to reach the peak to borrow some of his powers. Or maybe we need to kill a rampant aspect. Or maybe we just need to reach the Celestial Realm for another reason. Simply said, it is easy to make up a reason for this raid to exist. What's more interesting is the setting of this raid.
I still see it more as a world boss type of scenario. More, not even a world boss, more like of a world... Well, world boss, yeah, but it's not like you actually kill. You just do a test, and the test reward would be like a buff for a duration.
Different levels, the mountain presents you with different enemies. So let's start with what would happen once you enter the raid. You start at the bottom of the mountain, where you are very likely to meet Chip. Chip is an already established character who shows newcomers the wonders of the mountain. So you follow him around until we arrive at our first boss, the living mountain itself. This place has plenty of earth elementals who came alive due to the mountain's magic. Now, as I say this, don't confuse the earth elementals with Malphite. Malphite comes from Ishtal, which is quite far away from Dargon. Also, he's a good guy, we don't want to fight him. But from the earth elementals who would likely protect this place, we have, for example, the Blue Sentinel, who also appears in League of Legends. But the biggest of them all is the Stonebreaker. This one would be an excellent introductory boss. You know, you're fighting the mountain itself. And yes, I know he's a bit too big, but you can shrink him for gameplay purposes. WoW has been notoriously known for inconsistent boss sizes, and it's fine.
It's not fine. First of all. Also, that's not a boss. That's a machine. If he was up to size, he wasn't up to size at all. And I don't think he was up to size either. I don't know why we fought him in that size. I don't know why Zoval is on like 4 times bigger than the player. He should be at least this size, but whatever, you know.
Anyway, after Stonebreaker, we go further up the mountain. And suddenly, we start meeting all the lesser dragons and their worshippers. The coolest of these are the White Flame Dragons. There is also an important dragon who serves as a beacon to the other dragons, called Inviolus Vox. But the one that could likely become a boss would be the Eclipse Dragon. That's because this dragon is quite precious to the natives on the mountain, which would be boss number 3. You see, further up the mountain, we start encountering the tribes. There are...
See, I don't see us fighting these 3 at all. There's pretty much no reason. They're all technically good guys.
Are the Lunari, who hide in the shadows because they are being suppressed and they are relatively friendly, just like the Rakor. But the Solari are fanatics who blindly...
The Solari are fanatics, but Leona isn't. As far as I understood, Leona wasn't a fanatic. And later on she discovered the truth about the Solari and the Lunari. Unless that changed, I don't know at this point.
Protect the Celestial Realms at any cost. Even in the cinematic you can see how they are protecting the gateway that is leading to the peak of the mountain. And even though it would be cool if Riot allowed us to fight Leona herself.
See, the thing is, it's like... The Solari, you know who they remind me of? They remind me of something like Aurelian. Or something like... Yrel in the Draenor questline to get the Maghar Orcs. Where they become light fanatics and all that stuff. They are not technically evil. Are they an enemy? Do you fight them? Yeah, but it's not like an extermination type thing. You can't just defend yourselves like, okay, fuck them for now, like whatever, we don't know what happened here. Probably if we talk to Yrel, like, you know, we'll be like on better terms, but like, they're fanatics, but it's not like they go out of their way to attack anyone, you know?
champions in League of Legends tend to wear pretty thick plot armor. So instead, it would be cool if we could fight one of Leona's champions. The one known as Daylight Spear, Ravoon.
What a name.
Anyway, after defeating the Solari protecting the gateway, we would get near the peak. The first one...
Also, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure the regular Solari cannot defeat the mountain. Like, one-on-one. I'm just saying.
To meet us here would be the Infinite Mind Splitter. This is a legendary draconic creature with a very unique ability. It is told that its gaze gives you so much knowledge and insight that your mind crumbles beneath it. So fighting this...
Remember the Thor saying in Avengers, not Endgame, the Infinity War, where they find him and it's like, well, why? And like he wants to go and to Neverdalir or whatever and like craft the hammer. And I was like, well, shouldn't we all have that hammer? It's like, your minds will crumble as your body shatter before you, something like that. It's like a very, very funny way of saying it, where it's like you can't handle this power.
This boss would be all about getting buffs from it, while being careful not to get too many buffs, because it would kill you. And then, after getting past the Infinite Mind Splitter, we would arrive at the last stand of the mountain.
It's basically, it will work like corruption in WoW, where it's like too much corruption will make you very vulnerable, but like enough corruption, like you're actually doing a ton more damage.
The Arbiter of the Peak. The last guardian standing in the center of the peak, separating mortals from the celestial realms. This is the creature that leads the mortals who survive the climb directly to the celestials. In fact, that's what you can see here. He is guiding Tiari the Traveler to the celestial realms, where they would become the Traveler. But also, in case of emergency, the Arbiter serves as a guardian against unwanted visitors. Two things could happen here. Either we fight the Arbiter to get its approval to pass into the celestial heaven.
The thing is, okay, so the whole purpose of Mount Dargon is to basically use Aurelian Soul to kill void infestations, basically. Now, they're not actually infestations, but it's like whatever, it's easier to understand that way. That's why I don't see this, first of all, I don't see this as a raid as a whole. It's more of a trial type thing, like a test. A test of your reflexes so you could get stronger, but it wouldn't make any sense to go here first before we deal with the void that this place is protecting us from.
In this case, perhaps the Arbiter can test us with the lesser celestial beings, or we simply have to destroy the Arbiter. In this case, the Arbiter would probably fight us with the golems. And finally, perhaps after beating the Arbiter, we are granted access to the celestial realms. And while, again, I doubt we would be able to fight Aurelian Soul, perhaps we could fight one of his creations that is endangering the world. We have two of them that stand out. The first creation is simply known as the Great Beyond. Aurelian Soul himself calls it his magnum opus. This is essentially a smaller celestial dragon created in Aurelian's image. So this would be like fighting Aurelian himself, except this would make sense.
The Avatar.
The one I believe might be a bit more appreciated, however, would be the one known as the Scourge. This is also a celestial being created by Aurelian himself.
I always thought this was just a concept art of Baron, but...
League of Legends players might recognize this one as the pure celestial version of Baron Nashor. It is believed that the physical Baron was born out of the pure image. So, the Scourge being the final boss would be a really cool nod towards the League of Legends community. See what I mean? I just made up a 7-boss raid in a heartbeat. And I skipped a lot of details just so this video wouldn't be too long. There are the celestial beasts, the demons trying to consume the heavens, the dragon roost near the peak where dragons are born, the starhounds, Esmus, the breath of the world, and so on.
Wait, was that not... what's his face?
Starhounds,
He has the same mask as, what's his face? Bard. Or maybe he's like... what, made Bard?
The breath of...
I will definitely need to get to Necrit lore videos, for sure.
...of the world, and so on.
Zoe.
Designing this raid was simple because the lore
Fuck is that? Okay.
and the setup is already there. Once again, I did not make anything up. All of this already exists in
Really? Celestial Pug?
the universe. And Runeterra has a lot more places just like this one. So,
Yeah.
let's have a look at raid number 2. The one raid I know as a fact people would love to see is a Darkin raid.
I would say first raid most likely would be a non-grand, like a non-world ending raid. Something that is just not super world ending, like Shadow Isles or whatever it's called. Shadow Isles? Wherever Thresh and Ruined King is, okay? That would be a good overall raid, though I think it can just be a dungeon, because they're not that powerful compared to, like, you know, world-ending events. But if we're going just raids, then that would probably be more of a first raid type thing. Maybe not max level raid, I don't know, but it's like that would feel like something I would use as raid material for first raid. Because you actually want to have, usually, again, if it's horizontal, it doesn't matter. If it's vertical progression gear, you want to make sure that the next raid is, story-wise, more difficult, right? That it makes sense that's like, okay, we killed these guys, we powered up, now we can go to the next challenge, which is supposed to be harder. You can't just go into, like, kill the Celestials and then go and kill Shadow Isles. Like, bro, Shadow Isles, like, nothing compared to the Celestials, you know?
You can pull this off in a lot of different ways, but since the roots of the Darkin lore are in Shurima, the raid would most likely be in the deserts. Super quickly, in case you forgot, the Shuriman Empire rose to power after it started using the Sun Disk to reflect celestial magic into their soldiers, and turning them into the god warriors known as the Ascended. The Ascended were guaranteed immortality.
Okay, so that's what changed in the story, because I didn't really get that. Okay.
However, their minds were as fragile as they were before.
Okay.
After these Ascended fought the maddening void beasts released by their
Wait, so is the whole story of Shurima changed again?
neighbors, they started going a little bit mad. But their minds finally snapped when their emperor died too, and there was no one to give them directions. The story goes that a Darkin known as Zolani, who used to be a great healer, invented blood magic and used it to heal the other Darkin, by which she also infused them with the blood magic, with a secret plan to use the blood magic later to control them all. This was Zolani's secret plan to stop the rampaging Darkin. Unfortunately, the Celestials noticed that the Darkin were very dangerous, and they started sealing them inside special weapons. The sad part is, Zolani herself was also sealed inside her blades. So since Zolani was sealed away, there was nobody to control the others. And as a nice bonus, the remaining Darkin were now empowered with blood magic. Fortunately, in the end, the Celestials sealed all the remaining Darkin inside their weapons too. But stupidly enough, the Celestials let mortals to safeguard these Darkin weapons.
Yeah, that's the dumbest fucking thing you can do. The mortals? Nah.
So of course,
you might as well put it behind some animals or some shit.
Some people were tempted to pick up the weapons and use them for their wars. At which point, the Darkin immediately dominated the minds and bodies of those who picked them up.
Makes sense.
So yes, these rampaging god warriors managed to free themselves. So now, let's quickly go through those who would serve as big raid bosses. Perhaps the most famous one, and as far as we know, the most powerful one, is Aatrox. Yeah. After Aatrox was sealed away, his blade was picked up by a random warrior in the north. Of course, Aatrox immediately dominated the warrior's body, and since then he's been using blood magic to drain the dead around him, and make himself bigger. That's what you can see in his old cinematic. He starts small, but gets bigger the more things he kills.
How
In
big
fact,
does he
it gets
get?
to such a point where Aatrox became the only being to ever kill a celestial god.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in the last video, Aatrox stabbed someone wielding the power of the Aspect of War so hard, the Aspect of War was wiped from the stars. So...
Ow. What is that stab?
out of all the Darkin,
The Celestial God should have known that Aatrox passive was up and he should have backed off until he used it on the minion.
Aatrox is the ultimate end boss. Besides Aatrox, as mentioned, the second most important Darkin is Zolani. Now, Zolani has canonically not returned yet, but Legends of Runeterra is teasing that she might come back in the future.
I would say she might actually be stronger than Aatrox, so Aatrox would be like the second to last boss. And it's like when we kill him, we somehow free her or some shit like that.
Also, as a fun fact,
Maybe.
in the most recent cinematic, you can see that Talia and Kaisa arrive in front of the faceless statue of Zolani.
Oh, is that where they arrive? Okay. So why does she dive into the void though?
Next, there is also Varus, a
I am gonna look at all those videos and I hope there's also a video explaining the videos. Thanks, fuck, man.
Darkin who was sealed inside a bow inside a well. And he
Okay, so Varus' story changed, I guess.
got freed after 2 hunters fell into the well. So now, Varus' body is actually occupied by 3 souls. The 2 hunters and the Darkin. One could say he's the embodiment of 2.5 men. And there is also Kain, the one holding the scythe of a Darkin known as Rast. But as far as we know, Kain is pretty good at resisting Rast's power. So I doubt Rast would be freed. Also, Kain is a League of Legends champion. So in order for Rast to come out, Kain would need to die.
Would be interesting if Kain is the one that leads us into the raid. I don't know if Kain is good or evil, but because he's not in control of the Darkin, maybe he would require the help of the adventurers to maybe figure out a way to weaken the Darkin. To kill, to weaken, so that he will no longer have to fight for control over his body. Maybe.
And I don't think that's possible with all the plot armor.
Yeah.
But we are still not done yet. Next, from the lesser known Darkin, there is also Harazi, who was sealed inside a small emblem. Naganeka of Zurita, who was sealed inside a giant ballista. As you can see, she looks a little bit like a chicken. And that's because it is believed that a chicken touched the ballista and the Darkin took over the chicken's body. And lastly, there is Tarosh, who was sealed inside a massive halberd.
Tarosh is cool.
The reason why this Darkin raid would work is because all the Darkin have a common goal. They all hate Zolani. They see her as a betrayer who was trying to control them. So in this raid, we would likely fight the other Darkin as we are trying to get to Zolani. And after we kill her, we would face Aatrox as the final boss.
But for that to make sense, Zolani would have to be locked behind Aatrox as the last guardian to make sure that she's sealed for eternal torment, whatever, so no one frees her. Right? Wouldn't that make sense? Why would Aatrox be after Zolani? Who is protecting the seal of Zolani so that she doesn't escape because they don't like her?
Since all the Darkin Wars began...
Also, she doesn't really even have to be a boss. You might defeat Aatrox and then the story goes on that you free Zolani and you don't necessarily have to fight her. You don't know.
With Aatrox and Zolani starting a civil war. Also, it turns out that Aatrox was the general of all the other Darkin. So killing Aatrox would be the perfect end to the Darkin chapter. But let's not forget that Riot is already teasing a new Darkin.
Also, don't forget, you can't really kill them. Plot armor. Can't really kill them. Not the main ones, at least. Just saying.
The next champion in League of Legends might be a dog that picked up a Darkin dagger.
Oh,
and
nice.
if you're wondering why we would raid this place, first of all, the Darkin are pretty one-sided bad guys. But we could be led here by Nasus and Sivir. Nasus is an Ascended who avoided corruption, so he would be likely happy to put down his former brothers and sisters. And Sivir is holding the very first blade to be ever used to seal a Darkin. So once again, the lore is already there. And aesthetically, we have a good idea of what it would look like too. We would start outside around the temples of Zolani, which look creepy and corrupted. And later we delve beneath them to where the land is tainted by blood and death.
Okay.
For the next raid, let's stay in Shurima.
Here's another reason why Mount Dargon probably isn't the first raid. If you defeat the Celestials, wouldn't that also weaken the seal on the Darkin? Because usually that's how seals work, you know? It's like you either weaken the seal somehow, or you kill the person who made the seal, therefore releasing the seal. That's usually how seals work in like these fantasy scenarios. So in that regard, you cannot go to Targon, defeat the Celestials, before you deal with Void, Darkins, and some other bullshit that they're defending the world from, Ancient Ones and all that stuff.
Because if there is a raid I would personally love to see, it is the raid on Narimazeth, a city that is in ruins. That's because Narimazeth was the place where Shurimans tried to build the very first Sun Disk. This first version failed, and instead of the Ascended, it was only producing the Bakai, which are broken, twisted versions of the glorious Ascended. And in the end, the entire city collapsed onto itself.
Oh, nice.
After that, the Shurimans tried to build the Sun Disk again, but this time in the middle of the desert. But now, why would we want to raid these ruins? Well, that's because this city is being rebuilt by Xerath, the most powerful arcane mage on Earth.
Did the story of Xerath and Azir change since 2015-ish? I guess it did. I mean, it still kinda is valid because, like, when their emperor fell, you know, all that stuff happened. So maybe.
Runeterra, whose body was turned into pure arcane energy by the Sun Disk itself.
Well, that was his purpose,
story, right? Shorter. When Emperor Azir was a child, he became friends with a nameless slave. And despite slaves being forbidden from having names, he called him Xerath.
Yep.
Throughout the years, the two became as close as brothers.
Not
studying
really.
culture and history whenever
one-sided brotherhood.
Later on, despite his father hating him, Azir became his only surviving son. So unless his mother gave birth to another child, he would become...
So Azir's father hated Azir. I'm assuming because Azir was dumb enough to destroy his own empire. But yeah, maybe his dad saw it coming.
The emperor anyway. Well, in secret, Xerath simply made sure she would not give birth to another child. Usually he did it by corrupting the infant in her womb. Because it turns out, this entire time, Xerath was trying to break his roots from slavery. And now he had the ambition to gain power himself.
Why not,
So he justified these murders by telling himself that he was protecting a friend. Despite his efforts, the queen did give birth to another child. So Xerath summoned a storm and let lightning kill the queen and the child. Eventually, all these events led to Azir becoming the crowned emperor of Shurima with Xerath by his side. From this point on, Xerath was waiting for Azir to finally get rid of slavery.
Which he didn't.
Which never happened. Despite Azir being the most beloved emperor in history,
for reasons,
he allowed slavery to keep going on. And that angered Xerath.
Never change a good thing, I guess. No. If it works, don't fix it.
At the end of the story, the Emperor was chosen to become an Ascended himself. But during the...
I mean, at this point, it's like, is Xerath even evil? I mean, I guess he is, but it's like... I can understand, kind of thing.
Ceremony, when the Sun Disk was focusing its power into Azir's body, Xerath was so full of his BS
Yep.
He incinerated him and forced all the power of the Sun Disk into himself.
Yeah.
This resulted in Xerath's body being turned into pure arcane energy, the death of Azir, and the collapse of the Sun Disk and the destruction of the entire Empire.
Yeah.
You wanna know the twist at the end? If you read the story from Azir's perspective, you learn that he did want to remove slavery. He just wanted it to be a surprise. In fact, he...
Surprise, motherfucker!
even announced it just as Xerath betrayed him.
Wow.
But Xerath already murdered way too many people, so even though he really
it's too late. Yeah, too little, too late kind of thing.
wanted to stop, it was too late to go back. So Xerath doomed the entire Empire. And yes, because the Emperor died, Xerath is also technically the reason why the Dargon exist.
Okay.
I already mumbled about the lore for way too long, so just
That's
know
fine.
this.
Okay, so it didn't really change, it just wasn't as detailed. But yeah, but then you had Renekton's took Xerath into the tomb and locked themselves, and Nasus remained to guard the tomb from the outside or something like that.
Nasus's brother, Renekton, bound Xerath in a sarcophagus, and he locked himself with Xerath in a tomb. Many years later, scavengers opened the tomb and released Renekton and Xerath.
Weren't the scavengers Cassiopeia and Sivir though?
As I said, Xerath is currently in Narimazeth, and he is actually trying to rebuild the original Sun Disk. We don't really know why he is doing it, but I think it's safe to assume that he just wants more power. But you know what it smells like to me? It smells like a big old setup for a future raid.
I feel like this is a good setup for a dungeon, more so than a raid. I cannot view Xerath as a raid boss. I know how powerful he's supposed to be because of Sun Disk. Still feels like a dungeon level threat.
In Legends of Runeterra, you can see Xerath with all his worshippers. You can also see all the mini-bosses around him. Especially, we know about Demi Yin, the Unbound. But besides all of these heralds and acolytes, this raid would also have the Bakai, the original experimental ascended who come from
the trash mobs.
This city. But also, we would fight Renekton himself, because it turns out after hundreds of years of being locked in a tomb with Xerath, Xerath broke his mind by whispering to him that Nasus betrayed him. He purposefully led him to rot in the darkness. That's why Renekton is quite crazy these days. It all goes back to Xerath, who might be the ultimate villain of Shurima.
He is, but it's kind of like an understandable type villain. I mean, what he did is obviously like fucking atrocious, like fucking killing babies and shit. I don't know what he did between Azir becoming emperor and killing him. I don't know how many he killed in between there. But overall, he was not really in the wrong. He was like, bro, cancel out slavery, bro. Come on.
For the next raid, why don't we play off of the success of Arcane? No spoilers.
Let's not play on the success of Arcane, please.
Don't worry. Previously, when I told you about the cities Piltover and Zaun,
again, dungeon level threat.
I showed you that at the very bottom of that place you can find the ruins of an ancient Shuriken city. But that will become just a dungeon. The one that would become an interesting raid would be the Empire of Renada Glask. After I mention this, I know a lot of you will be confused. After all, Renada Glask is just a rich baron from Zaun. How can she support an entire raid? Well, in this case, it is all built on two factors. First of all, Renada is way too big of a character to be removed in just a dungeon. But more important...
Sure, but it doesn't mean that the zone can be the dungeon. She can be a raid boss somewhere else. She doesn't have to be a raid boss there. But also, is she that big of a character to, like... Again, like, when we're thinking raid and, like, world-ending events, Renata doesn't really fit the bill, does she?
Recently, Renada Glask released this year, and she was released as yet another big villain, after all the other already established villains in Piltover and Zaun. She simply really feels like a setup for something in the future.
I do wish, this has nothing to do with her, because I'm thinking about like in-game, I really wish they would add Baron Nashor as a world boss. That would be so cool. Not so much a world boss in the sense, like, you know how kind of Guild Wars 2 has like their events with like those massive bosses? That's what I feel like Baron Nashor should be, and it will give you a buff for like, let's say 24 hours or some shit like that. Not something that works in raids and dungeons, but something that helps you like a level or whatever, like use him as a tool for people to like level alts or some shit.
Because after already having Singed
Same
and
with
Dargon
dragons.
and Victor as villains in Zone,
Yeah.
Riot didn't need to make up another. It feels obvious they released Renata to be a villain supervising the other bad guys of Zone. Before her, Zone didn't really have a main villain.
Again,
so obviously she is
dungeons.
now filling that role.
Dungeons, some of them are even like fucking main quest stuff. Like Singed, I can see him as somebody as like not even a dungeon boss.
Her lore
That's how little I think of Singed.
is making her the main boss of Zone. Her raid would be very clear in its structure. We would follow the detective case of Caitlyn and Vi as we try to find her hideout. Perhaps Camille, an extremely dangerous assassin from Piltover, would be also interested in killing her. From that point on, we would literally raid her place with the Wardens. As a nice bonus, people would love to see the popular champions Zeri and Echo on our side, both of which are kids from the streets who have destroyed her warehouses before. But the last puzzle piece is, why would we raid Renata? Well, the Glask family owns Glask Industries, which is the most luxurious brand in Piltover and Zone. They sell perfumes and really fancy limb replacements. And unfortunately, this brand reflects a bit of real life, since these fancy formulas are developed down in Zone, using slave labor. But there is also a darker twist. All their products
I don't think that would change in the real world or in the game. I'm just saying.
are infused with a chemical formula, which
The only way that I can see stuff like that changing, like practically slave labor, basically China, is AI. Like you're gonna have, so for all of the like clothes, food, and like all the stuff that like people use on a daily basis that like, and you can't really go without. Once we would have like fucking robots doing that, and people won't have to do that anymore. Like maybe even farming robots can do and stuff like that, and people won't have to do that stuff anymore. Then I can see it going away. Until that point, though, I doubt it.
which can turn their customers into mindless rampaging husks at any moment. It's kind of like Apple. Now, since Renata is a recent champion, that's all her story really has. She is probably the most powerful Baron in Zone, who can make an entire city fall into chaos with the press of a button.
So again, I don't see her as a raid boss. Her power is mostly financial. That's not a raid boss scenario. That's a dungeon, man.
And now we're just waiting to see when she would unleash it. If you ask me, I normally wouldn't think that this would be a great raid.
No,
but
it's
this
dungeon,
would be very different from raiding dragons, which would actually give it the benefit of changing environment.
She seems like a dungeon boss for finishing his own story. That's what this dungeon is.
But also remember, this is riding off of Arcane's fame, and I doubt Riot would pass on that opportunity. That's why I feel confident we will meet Renata in the MMO.
We will. Not as a
And
raid,
now
though.
we are diving into the top 3 raids. I am extremely confident that some form of these will be in the MMO. That's for 2 reasons. First of all, these big villains are way too big to be ignored. We are talking about characters in the style of Arthas Menethil.
Hell
but also,
yeah, brother.
their lore turns them into world
I was gonna say Arthas was ignored, but technically, let's ignore Shadowlands, Wrath of the Lich King. Yeah, Arthas Menethil.
threatening enemies that have to be dealt with.
Speaking of, man, I don't know if I want to play Wrath of the Lich King, man. It's like with every passing day, I'm like, maybe I'm missing out. Probably not, but maybe.
With the first of these being Viego, the Ruined King.
Yeah.
There is not a sliver of a doubt we will see the
100%.
Ruined King in the MMO.
Yes.
You can point a gun to my head, tell me to guess a villain in this MMO.
I doubt he's gonna be a raid boss.
And I will smile knowing that I survived. It would be unimaginable to ignore him.
I
Now,
think it's a
the
dungeon.
issue lying in front of me right now is that Viego's story is massive.
It is.
On top of the normal story he has in League of Legends, he got his own book that is 400 pages long.
Yep.
The entire RPG game called Ruined King,
Yep.
which is focusing on his reawakening,
Yep.
and League of Legends got its own in-game event that was focusing on pushing his lore forward,
Yep.
which also included 3 cinematics.
Yep.
Right now, Viego has the most lore out of any champion in this universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me summarize
Yeah.
it as quickly as possible.
I agree.
Viego was a Camavoran prince who was forced into becoming the king at an early age. Because of this, he was not ready to become a king, and many would not consider him a really good king.
Yeah.
Still being a teenager, he often threw tantrums in the style of Kylo Ren. To keep the kingdom from crumbling,
He also kind of looks like Kylo Ren, and he has a similar sword almost to Kylo Ren.
he relied on his 2 advisors, Callista and Nuno Necrit of Camavor. Yes, that's the character named after me. Eventually, Viego met the love of his life, Isolde, a woman whom he loved very, very, very,
Very much. Yeah.
he loved her so much that he would do anything for her.
Fucking simp, bro. What a fucking simp, man.
But she didn't abuse it. Isolde was actually a very good queen.
Just
For the
got
majority
lucky.
of
He
Viego's
just got lucky.
ruling, he waved the kingdom's problems away just so he could be with Isolde.
Yeah,
Until
simp.
the day someone tried to poison Viego to finally remove him from the throne, and instead they poisoned Isolde. This is where Viego's dark side really started to show. After trying absolutely everything imaginable, nobody was able to heal his queen. And Viego's angry depression started taking over him. After weeks of desperate searching, Viego found out that there may exist a hidden place called the Blessed Isles, which held the sacred blessed waters which could heal anything. And so he sent
I'm
Callista away
assuming Blessed Isles turn to Shadow Isles.
to find the Isles. After a long adventure, Callista succeeded and she confirmed that the Blessed Waters did indeed exist. So on the next trip, Callista brought the Queen and the King and their soldiers with them, so that they could all heal the Queen and be happy ever after. But of course, there was a dark twist. The Queen died before they arrived on the Isles. And the priests confirmed that they can heal anything
As long as it's alive.
the person is alive.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop Viego from trying.
Yeah.
So after the priests denied him entrance to the waters, Viego massacred everyone who stood in his way, and following a creepy warden called Thresh, he arrived at the waters and dunked the queen in. For a moment, the waters did resurrect the queen. But then she was turned into a wraith, who killed Viego with his own blade, which caused his soul to be absorbed by the blade. I'm skipping a lot of details here, so just know that yes, the blade can absorb souls.
Nice.
We'll actually talk about the blade in the next MMO video, whenever that one comes out. Anyway, after Viego was killed with
Literally Arthas then.
his own blade, everything
Frostborn.
exploded in necromantic magic. His queen's soul was shattered into fragments, and the entire place was turned into the Shadow Isles. For 1,000 years, Viego's soul stayed there.
I'm assuming that's why they didn't want her to go into the blessed pool, because she was already dead, which then would make a wrath instead of like heal her.
The blade. Until the Pirate King Gangplank was told by Thresh that he could totally pick up the blade. His mind was totally strong enough to resist the power of the king. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. And the moment Gangplank picked up the blade, his mind and body was dominated by Viego, who then used that body to fully release himself back into the world. After that, even though everyone
Wait, so what happened to Gangplank in that time then?
had been dead for 1,000 years, Viego still wanted to bring his wife back.
Jesus
and so
Christ,
he started
bro.
to unleash the undead with the Black Mist all around the world, in an attempt to find all the fragments of his...
Okay, so... I guess he does control the Black Mist, but why does the Black Mist only go super strong, like Super Saiyan strong, during Hollow's End?
Queen's Soul. Eventually, he succeeded, and
Oh.
he actually managed to bring the Queen's Soul back.
Oh shit,
But
did he?
immediately after that, he was defeated by the Sentinels of Light. Remember the undead hunting class from the last video?
Man.
That's them. And not only did they permanently destroy the Queen's Soul, because the Queen didn't actually want to be resurrected,
Oh,
but
fuck.
Viego's entire story arc ended with him being teleported back to his homeland called Kamavor, where he
Okay.
was banished until the present days.
Ah.
You can actually see the end of the storyline in the cinematic called Absolution. And this is why Viego is going to be an incredible boss in the MMO. He does have a lot of story behind him, but more importantly, this entire time we have only seen his young, reckless personality, where he acts like a child throwing tantrums, as he's constantly trying to help someone he is obsessively in love with. But the thing is, his entire life he was chasing his queen. He was ready to go beyond death just to be with her.
But now she's completely
But
gone.
now he was imprisoned after learning that the queen didn't want to be with him, but also after her soul was permanently destroyed. So once Viego is unleashed from his prison again, instead of a cocky teenager, we are going to have a pissed off king who has nothing to lose. And that transformation into the Dark King is something I really want to see.
Is this a raid boss, though? I would say, in order to make him a raid boss, he would have to grow stronger after he gets unsealed somehow in the story, and he starts getting way stronger to become something akin to raid boss, to the point where he controls death or something like that. Like he becomes a kindred type level. Then I mean he might be already a kindred type level. I'm not sure about like the power levels. I believe just kindred is way stronger. However, the threat, like the Shadow Isles, that's not where he'll be. I don't think. So Shadow Isles can be a dungeon, and he would be a raid wherever his story takes him to become stronger. Maybe. That's the way I would probably do it.
And you can only
But I'm not a
imagine
writer.
what the raid is gonna look like. Hordes of risen Kamavoran soldiers,
Yep.
ancient undead dragons
Yep.
brought from his
I can see that.
homeland, the legendary Rasa the Sunderer, and even more legendary Hecarim of the Iron Order.
That's the thing. I don't think Hecarim will be in the raid. I think Hecarim will be in the dungeon, which is going to be separate. The thing is, they can pull a Cathedral of Eternal Night into a Tomb of Sargeras, where you have the dungeon, which it has its story, but the story is related to the raid. Then I would see it happen.
But there is also Commander Ledros, or maybe Karthus the Death Singer, and finally Thresh, the one who caused all of this to happen, the hidden master of puppets in the shadows. Simply said, Viego has a lot of meaningful enemies serving him, and the raid will be glorious.
And also depends if they're going for the... Because they might go for a Final Fantasy type where you have dungeons, trials, and raids. If they had dungeons, trials, and raids, I would say you have the dungeon, which is the Thresh, the Hecarim, and all that stuff. Then you have the trial, which is the Viego. And raid is like world-ending events. So I still don't see Viego currently as he is as a world-ending event. He's just pissed, but I don't see him being strong enough to, you know, go further than, you know, like an ancient one.
Side note, in the distant future, I kinda wanna cover the entire story of Viego. Wish me luck.
Please do. I hopefully in like the next 2 months, I think that's when I'll get to like all the Necrit videos.
For the next raid, we are not delving too far away from the undead theme, because it's time to cover the most brutal badass warrior this universe had ever seen. Super quickly, just for clarity. Viego's deathly magic is really undeath in its true meaning.
Yeah.
When he's turning his enemies into undead souls, it's more like he is preventing them from dying, and he's turning them into somewhat living wraiths instead. So he's not really the master of death. As you'll see,
he's a preventer of death.
That title goes to Mordekaiser.
Yes.
His story begins as a warlord known as Sun Uzal. During his time, the main continents were occupied by barbaric tribes. Sun Uzal believed that by killing as many people as possible, he would please the gods of the afterlife. And so, he forged an empire in blood and death. As his life was near the end, he took great satisfaction in knowing that he would sit at the gods' tables, in the glorious halls of bones. However, when he died, he found no glory waiting for him.
So he refused to die.
Instead, Sun Uzal stood in an empty grey wasteland, with an occasional soul drifting by. He watched as these lesser spirits faded into the fog, unmade and lost in time. But Sun Uzal refused to fade. His will, tempered by rage and torment, held him together. In other words, he was simply too angry to die. He started listening to the disembodied whispers around him, and he learned this was Oknun, the language of the dead. Slowly, he came up with a plan. He began whispering temptations into the veil between realms, promising power to any who would listen. And sure enough, he managed to tempt a few cultists into bringing him back to life. Lacking any flesh or bone, he told the cultists to bind his spirit to metal plates, forged in the likeness of his old armor. And so he rose as the Revenant of Iron and Hate. No longer called Sun Uzal, but rather, in Oknun, he was Mordekaiser. Originally, these cultists wanted to use Mordekaiser as a weapon in their trivial wars. But instead, Mordekaiser killed them all, and he used their souls to forge himself a brutal mace called Nightfall.
Nice.
With that, Mordekaiser's second conquest of the world started.
Why not, right?
But this time, he was wielding necromantic magic. All his enemies were confused because it seemed like Mordekaiser only cared about massacre and destruction. Entire generations perished under his campaign. But in reality, there was far more to Mordekaiser's real plan.
Oh, was there?
At the center of his empire, he raised the Immortal Bastion, which became the largest structure on Runeterra. And he used that place to gather information about spirits and death, be it by capturing and studying demons, or torturing Yordles until he could harvest.
I love Mordekaiser already. Torturing Yordles? Sign me up. If he's a faction, I'm on it.
Their secrets. He did everything in his power to understand the realms beyond. Eventually, Mordekaiser became such a tyrant the entire continent banded against him. But when he was ultimately defeated, it was not because of his enemies, but rather he was betrayed from his inner circle. The Immortal Bastion had a secret cabal led by a witch we know as LeBlanc. They managed to separate Mordekaiser's spirit from his armor and seal the empty armor in a hidden place. As a result, without his physical vessel, Mordekaiser was forced out of the physical realm. What none of the cultists knew, however, is that all of this was according to Mordekaiser's plan. The entire time he was
This guy's playing fucking 10D chess.
forging a destiny greater than the halls of bones. When he finally returned to the empty wasteland of the afterlife, he was met by the hundreds of thousands who died under his reign. Prevented by his dark magic, they would never fade. They would be his eternal army bound to his will. But even the weakest of the spirits were given purpose. Just like he used the souls of the cultists to forge his mace, the weakest of the souls would become the building blocks of his afterworld. And so Mordekaiser became the king of the afterlife. And even though he was cast out, with his physical vessel being banished in the immortal bastion in Noxus, he is already planning on how to return. And once he does so, after so many people were fed into his realm, he would be so powerful nobody would know how to stop him. Since that is where his story cut off, you know that this is a setup for the future. Even in League of Legends, sometimes Mordekaiser is joked about as a raid boss. Once he starts rolling, you need the entire team to get him down.
And not as much as Nasus or... yeah, basically Nasus. Maybe... who else is as much of a raid boss as Nasus really at the end game? I don't think anyone is. Maybe Volley sometimes. Volley is a mini raid boss, yeah. But yeah, nothing as much as Nasus. But I can see him being a raid boss if he is actually gonna be controlling death. Like he's actually the afterlife boss. Like he's above Kindred and all that stuff.
And Riot would be foolish not to use him as a badass raid boss in the MMO.
I never seen a Mord in game that was actually like a raid boss. But then again, on a Kassadin, Mord is really not that big of a deal.
Especially since we already know some of the other characters that we would see in his raid. When Mordekaiser was conquering the world the second time, he had two demons which he used as his companions. These would be Tybolk, the giant fire demon, and Atakan, an iron-bound shadow demon.
Oh, so that's who it is.
To get to him, we would probably have to get past the one who banished him, LeBlanc, and I wouldn't be surprised if we also met Vygar, the Yordle Mordekaiser tormented to get his...
On purpose, I would never go and kill Mord because of what he did to Veigar. I'm just saying.
Yordle secrets. Finally, we would likely fight alongside Swain, one of the leaders of Noxus who is actively trying to root out the dark magics from Noxus. So yeah, maybe Mordekaiser's story is not as long as Viego's, but Mordekaiser is built on brutal conquest. His story is simply badass, and you bet that's what people want to fight.
I need to understand why LeBlanc is considered evil, even though she's the one who stopped Mord. What did she do that she's banished from Noxus and is wanted?
And this takes us to the last raid I want to show you. Not only is this raid inevitable, but it is going to be the final raid before Riot starts to get sweaty about their future. Because from that point on, they would be forced into making up new enemies. Yeah. And that's usually when the lore of MMOs crumbles.
Yeah.
With the ultimate endgame in Runeterra being the battle against the end of everything. The Watchers of the Void. Yeah. Now, I know we already quickly summarized the story of the Watchers when we talked about the world. But we need to quickly do it again because if they get their own raid, it would be a really cool merging of multiple storylines of this universe.
Yeah.
Basically, at the beginning of everything, there was nothing. Just dark, empty void. Until there was a spark of light. This spark of light illuminated the darkness and revealed creepy entities we know as the Watchers, who before this event didn't even know about their own existence. Of course, since this first light woke the Watchers up for the first time,
they just want to go back to sleep.
The Watchers got annoyed and they decided to silence it so they could sleep again.
Yeah.
As they drifted closer, we learned that this spark was indeed our reality. So to get rid of the light, the Watchers tried to poke it and taint it. But they were always too big to get through and deal with it themselves. So instead, they reached into reality, stole something, corrupted it, and released it back. In hopes that it would destroy the rest of the reality. But even that wasn't too successful. Eventually, the Watchers started whispering into the light. And the Ice Witch known as Lysandra answered. The Watchers promised her people immortality and great power. In exchange, they asked Lysandra to prepare her world for the coming of the Void. In secret, behind the backs of her two sisters, she agreed. The Watchers empowered the strongest of their followers and turned them into the Iceborn. And soon enough, the Watchers broke into reality in the Freljord. With it, Lysandra's allegiance with the Watchers was undeniable. But as the Watchers rose, for the first time, Lysandra got to see how horrifying they were. And she realized they came here to destroy everything.
Yeah.
In desperation,
Immortality means nothing, there's nothing to rule over.
Lysandra sacrificed her sisters and the Iceborn to use their magic to freeze the Watchers beneath the ice. But even that magic wasn't enough. Beneath the ice, the Watchers were only sleeping. They would break out should they try to wake up. So these days, Lysandra is kidnapping the surviving Iceborn. She freezes them in her fortress. She is then using their inherent powers to reinforce the ice. And she is feeding their dreams to the Watchers to keep them asleep. As a bonus, Lysandra is killing anyone who remembers the old days, and who could spill out that she actually kinda betrayed all humanity. See, this setup on its own is enough to support a raid.
Yes.
Let's say we raid.
That I agree. That is a raid type fucking scenario. 100%. That's world ending. That's a raid.
The Frostguard Citadel, which is where Lysandra is keeping the Watchers frozen. First, we get there by crossing the Howling Abyss. This is the bridge that is incredibly iconic for League of Legends players. This is where you play ARAM. I bet you never noticed that at the end of the bridge, you can actually see the entrance to the Frostguard Citadel. And in fact, the ghastly shopkeeper is one of the soldiers who remembers the coming of the Watchers. After getting inside, we would fight Lysandra's frozen thralls. These are trolls that Lysandra twisted herself to serve her. But they are also supported by the Harbinger of Thralls, whatever that is. Then we would fight through Lysandra's army of the Druklorn. These warriors dedicated their lives to Lysandra, knowing that they are protecting the world from the end of everything. Next, we would face the most mysterious creatures of the Freljord. We don't really know what they looked like in their pure form. We only know what they look like after they were corrupted by the Watchers. And these would be the creatures with their very interesting names. There is She Who Wanders, They Who Endure, and It That Stares. Whatever these creatures used to be, now they are titanic. With their I-beam disintegrate.
I feel like this raid boss would actually be all of them together. It's one of those, like a council fight type thing, not like one at a time.
In reality. Then of course we would have to get past Lysandra herself before we arrive at the Frozen Watcher. I think it's likely that we are going to fight one of these. And what's cool is that even though this is the toughest enemy this universe has to offer, even if we defeat it, we don't really defeat all the Watchers. That's the clever backdoor.
We also don't know how many there are. We don't even know if the Watchers that went to our reality, to that reality, are all of them. I think she only froze like a few of them, not all of them.
Of this universe. We can't destroy them all. They are the primal force. There is an endless sea of them. If anything, our reality is a parasite in their void. So if we defeat a Frozen Watcher, all we really do is plug a hole. But the Watchers continue being a threat. Anyway, this Watcher looks strange, doesn't it? It's not really the floating eye that you would imagine. Well, that's because, as it is with all the League of Legends stories, there is a twist. You see, just as the Watchers are able to corrupt a being, they are also open to being corrupted themselves.
Makes sense.
The process always comes from both sides. And so, the more the...
It's like that sentence... sorry. The sentence of like, if you stare long enough into the void tends to stare back. This is that in reverse. When you stare long enough into the light tends to stare back at you.
The Watchers interact with humans, for example, the more human-like they become themselves. And since the Watchers in the Freljord were frozen there for thousands of years, Legend of Runeterra shows us that once they would break through, that's what they would look like. They would have many human-like limbs. The story told us they have fur from all the animals, and they even have a creepy fake face. So no, this is not what a pure Watcher would look like. This is a Watcher tainted by the people of the Freljord.
Mutated.
Also, you might be wondering, how do we actually beat the most powerful being in this universe?
Do elaborate.
Well, that's where the stories collide. First of all, Lysandra would be the key to freezing the Watchers. She would have to be on our side at the end there.
Yeah,
also,
we beat her ass, and then she's on our side. Yeah, the usual.
Primal god Ornn constructed the bridge leading to the Citadel. And this bridge was used as a magical seal to help keep the Watchers down there. So Ornn himself would help us. But most important...
I think we need to beat the shit out of him first, though. In order, like, kind of like... We beat the shit out of him to prove that we can deal with the Watchers type of thing, probably.
Importantly, there is another massive storyline that is in Shurima, centered around a Voidborn known as Bel'Veth. Because this video is already way too long,
way too long.
Super quickly. You know how the Watchers themselves got tainted when interacting with reality?
Okay.
Down in Shurima, a small pocket dimension formed between the Void and our reality.
Yeah.
It was sort of like a cancer growth on the...
Is that Kassadin?
Void. In fact, if you dive deeper into this, you may realize that this is directly correlating to real-life cancer. If you don't know, cancer is just living tissue that decided, hey, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened here.
Basically.
As the Void started consuming people in Shurima, it got
not living tissue, it's a cell.
tainted by the people, and it formed
Malfunctioning cell that doesn't want to die.
Soon, because this cancerous growth inside the Void needed to represent itself, it grew a creature known as Bel'Veth. A Voidborn that looks a bit fishy because she consumed a harbor, but also she doesn't actually like the Watchers because the Watchers want to end everything. And all Bel'Veth wants to do is to live. And so these days, Bel'Veth is consuming entire cities at a time. And she is rebuilding everything with the information she got. With her ultimate end goal being to rebuild all reality. So that she could be reality, and she would be strong enough to fight the Watchers. Of course, at this time, she doesn't really have all the information gathered. So whenever she's recrafting cities and people, it all looks uncanny. However, at this point, she consumed hundreds of thousands of people. And she's using all of their brain power, so Bel'Veth is very smart. Now, the reason why this storyline is important is because Bel'Veth once talked to Kai'Sa, and she offered her a deal. If mortals helped Bel'Veth consume reality faster, she would spare them to be the last she would consume. Bel'Veth said that she did the calculations and she knows that humanity could never beat her. But at least, with this deal, she gave them the chance to create a weapon.
Where is this cinematic from? Is this the Bel'Veth cinematic? God damn, I need to watch this fucking cinematic.
Or maybe find a hero who maybe could slay her.
Kassadin.
She knows they could never achieve it.
Kassadin is my
hero.
hero.
Willing to give them the chance. And you see, this is where we can get another twist. This wasn't confirmed, this is purely my theory. But I believe that there is a way to destroy Bel'Veth. See, Bel'Veth believes that we can't beat her. But the fact is, she used hundreds of thousands of human brains to figure it out. But the humans can't even comprehend the power of the Celestials. So I believe Aurelian Soul could destroy her. She just doesn't have the brain power to figure that out herself. So what I think is going to happen is that at some point we are going to beat Bel'Veth.
Yeah, but we can't do Dargon first if we're gonna beat Bel'Veth. It's like, you know?
Realizes she was wrong. She realizes that humanity is stronger than her when fighting the Watchers, and she decides to help us destroy them. So should we ever get a raid on the Frostguard Citadel? I wouldn't be
I think we would still just destroy her.
Surprised if before that we got another raid where we delve into Bel'Veth's little pocket dimension, and with her help we move to the north. Or, you know, we just destroy her. That would be way cooler.
Yeah.
So all of that is still just a wild theory. The fact is, we are fighting the Watchers. That is inevitable.
Yeah, eventually we have to. I mean, this is what it is.
And that was all the raids I wanted to show you. All of them.
The problem is, it's like, what comes after the Watchers? Because Watchers is literally like, it's like fighting the first ones in WoW. It's like, why are you gonna be like, oh well, the reason we want the, like, imagine they go but down there. I was like, well, the reason we wanted to keep sleeping is because if we're awake, our brains start manifesting just by default these other creatures that we can't deal with, so it causes a problem. Imagine like they go down that route. It's like, oh my god,
are
fuck
supported
off.
by the lore, and it is up to Riot whether they want to do them or not. Except the last 3 raids. Those are happening. There is no way around it.
Eventually,
but because people are going to freak out, let me give you some honorable mentions. This universe also technically has the Grim Reaper. While they may have many forms, the most well-known form of death itself is Kindred. We wouldn't really have a good reason to fight them though, since death isn't really an evil entity in this universe, but, you know, they exist.
Well, it can be, depends how you spin the Mordekaiser story, right?
I would also love to fight against Vladimir's Hemomancers. We could also get a raid on the Earth Sign, with Volibear being the final boss, the primal god of wilderness. In the east, there is also the mysterious demon known as Ashlash, a 7-handed liquid demon that is locked beneath the earth, in a place known as the 7th layer. Neela is currently wielding its power, and it looks like a setup for the future. Also, there is Fiddlesticks, the primal and most powerful demon on Runeterra. Fiddlesticks itself is just a puppet. The demon is what you can see inside the cage. But because Fiddlesticks is roaming around the world, I couldn't really figure out a raid setting. But you bet we are fighting him at some point. If you want a creepy video to react to, find Fiddlesticks cinematic. Simply said, the lore supports so much more than what I showed you today. And in the future, I can make a smaller video where I cover the dungeons of this MMO.
Samira,
all being theoretical, of
Darius.
But for now, that's it. I'm running out of content, so let's see, what do we have next?
But here's my question, why do you hold the lav mic?
Wait, what do you...
Alright. Damn, that was a really good video. I would say a bunch of them are raids, but sorry, a bunch of them can be raids, but like I feel like a few of them that he said raids are definitely dungeon. There's like, look, there's no way something like whatever her name is from Zon is a raid. She doesn't have the power. Like, her power is money, you know? But it's not China. China would be a raid, right? She's more like, you know, some city in China where all the slaves are at, yeah. Like, you know, it's like, she runs a slave camp, basically. That's the dungeon. It's not a raid. Anyways, yeah, great video. I don't want to make this any longer than it has to be. I also try to react as little as I can because it's already over an hour just of reacts because the video is like almost an hour. Yeah, anyways, Necrit, great videos. I can't wait to start doing going through the lore that he says about the character. The Azir Zereth part was kind of weird, but also kind of still right based on what I covered in the lore. But yeah, anyways, that's the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.